presentarles a Anna Hurst, que es la directora del Museo Parque y de los programas de biblioteca de la Sociedad Astronómica del Pacífico en Estados Unidos. Ella tiene una educación de física y se ha dedicado pues a museos y a todo lo que es actividades de divulgación, sobre todo de la astronomía, y nos va a hablar ahora ¿cómo se llama? de igualdad de género en ciencia, empezando con los niños pequeños, ¿no? Entonces démosle un abrazo.
Gracias. Buenos días. And now I switch to English. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for letting me tell you about your work, my work. I'm really excited to share that with you, and I'm sorry I can't do it in Spanish, but thanks for listening in my language. I heard the talk in the title in Spanish. It's Opening the Door, Promoting Gender Equity in Science, starting with young children. And much of my work in the last several years has been focused on very young children, 3 to 5-year-olds. So I'll tell you a bit more about that. Let's see. First, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the organization where I work. The Astronomical Society of the Pacific is a nonprofit organization based in San Francisco. And our focus is astronomy education and public outreach. And most of our programs are national in scope, so we reach across the United States. We were founded in 1889, which is pretty old for an organization in the United States. It was founded when a group of people who were really excited about astronomy got together to watch a total solar eclipse in 1889. I believe it was February 7th, 1889, on Mount Hamilton, which is south of San Francisco. And they enjoyed the experience so much that they decided to form a society of people who were enthusiastic about astronomy. And since then, we've been an organization to bring together both professional astronomers, amateur astronomers, hobby astronomers, to share their passion of astronomy. In the last 20 or so years, we've been focused more on education and public outreach. We've started to get, in those 2+ decades, we've received funding from the National Science Foundation as well as NASA for our education programs. And we work with a variety of educators, so teachers in schools, professors at colleges. I work with educators in museums and parks, librarians. We have a program for amateur astronomers, so people who like to do astronomy in their free time as a hobby. And many of them like to set up their telescopes and invite the public to take a look. And they tend to be really excited and know a lot, but they don't really know how to talk about it because they use a lot of jargon. So our Night Sky Network program helps amateur astronomers better be able to communicate their passion of astronomy to the public. So we create hands-on activities and lesson plans that we distribute to all of these audiences, and also run professional development training workshops at conferences, at museums, in schools, and also we do a lot of online education, online training, so that people can participate from anywhere. We additionally have, we host a conference every year focused on public outreach, so we bring together people like ourselves who are interested in talking to the public about science, mostly astronomy, but we go beyond just astronomy. And we get together as a professional community to talk about best practices and share our work. And we also publish some conference proceedings. So we still have a bit of a foot in the professional astronomy field as well. And often we'll partner with the American Astronomical Society, which is the main professional organization for astronomers in the United States. So that's a little overview of the ASP. I'll call it that from here on out because it's a mouthful, Astronomical Society of the Pacific. So I want to just start by watching this short video, which was made by the BBC. It's not research-based. It's just kind of illustrating a point. You're going to see some young children, and they took a boy and put girls' clothes on him. They took a girl and put boys' clothes on him, and had some volunteers play with them and choose different toys. And you'll see what the volunteers, what kind of toys they choose based on what they think the gender of the child is. This was going around on social media a while back, so you may have seen it. But this is just kind of to get us thinking about some of the issues at hand here. Oh, how do I get the sound? Wait, I think this is off. Ah, okay. Here, I'll... Okay.
Look at this. Look at this. Do you like it, don't they? So you've got a delicate. There you go. You're a good little girl, aren't you, Sophie? Look, what does this say? Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams. Ooh, look at this, Sophie. Meow, meow. I think she liked that pink dolly the best.
If I were to tell you actually that Sophie is Edward,
Ah,
might that change anything?
I maybe thought, oh, this is a little girl, so I have to give her little girl things.
Hello. 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 Hello.
What's this one? Oh, what's that one do? Is that a robot? What about this? Oh, you like that one? What does this one do? Oliver.
You've gone for, you could say, boy toys for this boy.
Possibly in my subconscious, but for me, I was just going for what was around me, but in fact my subconscious was automatically playing a trick on me that I was...
If I tell you that he is actually a girl.
Really?
Yes.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. I suppose it's because of the stereotype.
And then that changed your behaviour towards
it
the
did.
child.
It did.
And your behaviour was
Yeah,
quite
it
directive.
did. 1, 2, 3. Do you want to see my robot?
She's picked up the robot, the car, the puzzle game. I think she's been much more physical in handling the child than the eyeballs have been with girls.
That really astounded me because I thought that I was somebody that had a really open mind.
Surprise. So I automatically went for the pink fluffy toy because I see it was a girl, so I was sort of stereotyping.
I've always thought I was rather more open-minded than that, and I would think, you know, these are children's toys, whatever the gender.
It will make me think the next time I'm with a child, so my niece and my nephew, to make sure that I am actually being sort of fair and equal with all of them, and just giving each child an opportunity to just be whoever they are.
Yeah, so that you can see that those volunteers were well-meaning. They don't think of themselves as having stereotypes, and I'm sure in other areas of their lives they try to adjust, but we're all part of a system where these stereotypes are embedded. And so girls, from the time they're born, are receiving messages, even if their parents are very on top of it and giving them, you know, toys that encourage spatial awareness. They're part of a society that treats girls differently. And it may not be as blatant as it once was, but it's still there. There's still these kind of micro messages that girls are getting all the time, from the time they're very young. And research shows that girls and boys don't demonstrate any significant difference in their abilities in math and science, right? We know that girls can do math and science, and in some places, girls are scoring better than boys in elementary school in those subjects. But the differences that consistently appear is in their levels of confidence and interest in STEM subjects. And I would argue that that's because these girls are just getting these constant messages that it's not for them. Just one example, the National Science Foundation in 2003 had a study where they looked at girls in grades 4, 8, and 12 in the United States, and they were much less likely than boys to say, I'm good at math or I'm good at science. So it's really important that we recognize that we're all part of this system and girls are getting these messages, and we work on increasing their positive STEM experiences and counteracting the negative messages that they're constantly getting. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the work we're doing at the ASP in these areas. The first is the main program I'm going to talk about is My Sky Tonight. This was a program funded by the National Science Foundation. We were the leads on it, but we worked with some early childhood psychology researchers and some early childhood educators to create astronomy activities for 3 to 5-year-old children. You can access all of those at that website. We didn't focus specifically on boys versus girls, but we were creating really science-rich experiences for very young children, whether boy or girl. And then I also want to tell you about a program where we are training amateur astronomers on how to adjust their presentations to be more welcoming to girls. So those are the 2 programs I'm going to focus on. And I'm also going to share some highlights from some of our partner programs. We partner with the Girl Scouts of the USA, and they're doing great work in connecting girls with STEM, and they're all about creating confidence and success and empowering girls in everything they do in their lives. It's a really wonderful organization. And then SciGirls is a TV program on PBS, the Public Broadcasting System in the United States. And they also have a wealth of educator resources, which you can find at that website. And both the Girl Scouts and SciGirls have a lot of resources in Spanish as well. So if you're looking for materials to use in your programs, I encourage you to check out both of those. So let's talk a little bit about My Sky Tonight. And as I mentioned, the National Science Foundation funded it. We just wrapped this up after 6 years. It was our big project. We produced a lot of hands-on activities that were really rich in science. So we were looking at what does it look like for a 4-year-old to engage in science? And how can we encourage that engagement? So I'm again going to show you a short video because I think the kids can show it off better than I can talk about it. And then I'll go into some more details. And you'll hear my voice anyway.
The Astronomical Society of the Pacific creates engaging, hands-on astronomy activities and trains educators from a variety of settings on how to most effectively communicate the excitement of astronomy to their audiences. We heard again and again from educators in museums and parks that while they were enthusiastic about these materials, they were also unsure how to engage with very young children. To fill this gap, astronomy educators at the ASP teamed up with developmental psychology researchers for the NSF-funded My Sky Tonight project. We have created a set of research-based, hands-on astronomy activities that are rich in science practices and designed to be developmentally appropriate for pre-K children. We have also provided training for the informal educators who receive these materials. We designed our My Sky Tonight Toolkit activities to encourage children to engage in science practices and to guide educators in using developmentally appropriate techniques when working with young children.
Science practices are just another word for the way scientists go about doing science. What do scientists do? They study the world by asking questions, making observations, and constructing new explanations for what they observe. These same practices are natural for children, though we can help them along the way by supporting and encouraging them as they explore the natural world.
The My Sky Tonight project builds on evidence regarding the best ways to support preschool-age children's learning about astronomy. Our team draws on these guidelines and on empirical research in developmental psychology and education.
In addition to creating these materials and training, we have also advanced the knowledge base in early STEM learning through a series of studies. For example, one of our studies explored children's natural interest in astronomy.
We sent families home with a diary in which they could log their conversations about nature for a period of 2 weeks. When we received back their journals, we learned that 15 to 20% of their conversations were about the sun, the moon, the stars, planets, astronomy related.
Over 300 educators have participated in My Sky Tonight training workshops, and we distributed the activity toolkit to over 200 museums, parks, nature centers, and libraries across the United States, reaching thousands of young children and their families. Our work with educators and children has sparked our interest in further research. We are currently investigating the role of storybooks in supporting young children's engagement in the practices of science.
All right, so that's what I've been, thank you. That has been the main focus of my work for the last 6 years, so almost half the time I've been at the ASP. So I want to dig into it a little and get you maybe thinking about this as well. So I'm going to ask you to maybe participate. So our main goals for My Sky Tonight were to engage children in developmentally appropriate astronomy activities. So that means that we're approaching it from what is a 4-year-old capable of learning and how do they best learn, using what we know about how very young children learn. So we're not just taking an activity that was designed for a 3rd grader and adding some puppets or something like that. You know, we're really starting with what works for young children. And a great resource if you're looking for information about and research about how young children learn is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. I think I had this on my final slide as well. I hope I do. So we used a lot of their resources as we were developing our materials. And we were really focused on science practices. Again, you know, so while there's value, say, in STEAM activities, right, where you might have a child's drawing a picture of some stars or creating an art project, we were really focused on the practices of science in our activities. So I want to go a little bit more into what does that look like for young children. Using science practices is what you all do. You're scientists, right? So it's what children do, what scientists do to investigate science phenomena. So we were focusing on each activity being focused on a phenomenon, which I know you all know what a phenomenon is, but you know, we were defining it as an event in the natural world that can be observed, described, and explained that lead us to question, wonder, and try to explain. So how do we help children ask and answer questions about scientific phenomena? And we do this through an appropriately sequenced and well-supported sequence of science practices. So here are some science practices that I'm sure you all engage in, and that, believe it or not, young children can do as well. Observation. That's first, right? We're observing this phenomenon, and it's more than just looking at it. We're not just looking at the moon, we're noticing important details. And details that are relevant to the question we asked. So when you're helping children engage in observation, help them focus on those important details. Analyzing data. Can a child analyze data? They can. This is helping them to make sense of data. Something that young children love to do is compare and contrast. And that's really taking some information you have and analyzing it, right? Looking for patterns. That's another skill that children love to show off, right? They know how to find a pattern. And then constructing explanations. That's what we're ultimately working up to. This helps us answer science questions using evidence, which you get from that first step, observation. And the children can construct these explanations together with an adult. So the adult doesn't just tell them the answer. The child might not be able to come up with the answer herself, but together you can create this explanation. Some other science practices that don't necessarily fit into this sequence, but maybe help along each step. Tool use. And astronomers, that's really important, right? Because we need tools to extend our senses, telescopes and cameras. And we can help children realize that tools that's what they're doing, is they're extending our own senses and helping us gather more information. Modeling and representing, also very important in science. This can help children as they're constructing their explanations. Often young children don't yet have the vocabulary to express their more complex thoughts, so they could use a model or gestures to help as they're explaining something. So even if you don't hear them say the right words, you can see if they're understanding a concept because they could show it in a model or a drawing or through gestures. These can really help them communicate their thinking. So I want to show you an example of one of our activities. This one is called Bear's Shadow. I'm going to show you a video, and then I want you to see which of those science practices you observe in the video. Just to set it up, this activity, we start off by reading a storybook called Moon Bear's Shadow. It's a story about a bear who goes fishing, and his shadow scares the fish away, so he doesn't get the fish. And then he's very angry at his shadow, and he spends the rest of the book trying to lose his shadow, get rid of it. He hides behind a tree, he tries to nail it to the ground, he tries to bury it in a hole. And throughout the illustrations in the book, you notice his shadow is gradually moving across the ground as the sun is moving across the sky. And then at the end of the story, his shadow's pointing in the other direction, and he's able to catch a fish. This relates to the apparent motion of the sun across the sky. And after reading the story, we had children try to model this with a flashlight sun and a little bear figure and a pond and a fish. And we give them some challenges. Can you make a long shadow? Can you make the shadow touch the fish in the pond? This is really easy for an adult, but it's right on the edge of what children this age are able to do, so it's a fun challenge for them. So I'm going to show you a video of some children doing this. I think this one has subtitles. It's a little hard to understand the children, but this one does have subtitles. And see which of those science practices I mentioned you notice in this video.
Now the shadow's right there, right? When he made it disappear. Now bear's on the fish. Let's see. If I put bear here, can you make his shadow touch can you make his shadow touch the fish? Can. Bear did it. You can do it too. Try moving the flashlight all around bear. Like put it on the back, on the side. See the shadow? So now the shadow's over here, right? When you put it back there. Now you see the shadow over here. So how do you make the shadow over there? There you go.
got it.
How do you make it long? Where'd Bear go?
Did you even do the one
he's
where
hiding behind the tree.
Did you even
Let's see. Let's see Bear's shadow. Can you make a shadow?
I know how to make a shadow long.
Oh yeah, can you tell us how you make it long? Oh.
Better shadow.
Notice how he's demonstrating. He can't articulate it, but he's demonstrating with the flashlight.
How did you do that, Owen? How did you make it long?
Oh, look at that long shadow. Yeah, there's Bear's shadow. And then we'd also have children trace their own shadows on the ground outside, and then a time later, so we're connecting it to the real phenomenon.
More tilted than that one.
Oh yeah. And where's the sun? Can you point to the sun? Don't look at it. And where's your shadow? Yeah. So all of those children were 3, 4, and 5. So there's again the list of the science practices I mentioned. Which of those did you notice?
Well, of course, observation.
Right, definitely observation.
Yes, two first and constructing.
Yeah, so they didn't necessarily articulate with words, but did you notice the boy really showing? I said, how do you make a long shadow? And he showed me, right? So maybe he can't quite put words to the concept, but he was showing it with the model. Yeah. Analyzing data when she was comparing her two shadows, right? And explaining it, and then the sun. Yeah, even if she can't say, well, the sun appears to move from east to west across the sky, and thus my shadow. But she still was demonstrating these science practices. Yeah. Tool use, not so much in this one, but I would argue that all of the other ones were hit in this example. So how can you best support young children in engaging in science practices? Remember that these are activities to enable children to investigate their world, and you're providing guidance for that. Focus on phenomena, right? That's what science is all about. So try to build the child's experience around a phenomenon. Real experiences, or it could be photos or video. Obviously in astronomy, it's very hard to directly interact with most of the phenomena we deal with, especially for young children. The moon is one where, you can directly observe the moon, but in other cases, it's very abstract or far away or big or happens on a long time scale. So photos, videos, models are all ways to interact with a phenomenon as well. And multimodal engagement. So think about different ways they might engage with the material through touch, using gestures. Again, if they don't have the spatial vocabulary yet, recognize that they might be using their hands to talk about size or distance. And the physical materials you're providing should be, again, helping the child make sense of the phenomenon. So if you just think like, how can I help this child experience this phenomenon and build it around that? And asking questions is so important. You want to ask questions that help children notice important details, support their observations, help them with comparing. Comparing questions are great. Like, how did the shadow change when we moved the light? And that will help them start to think about the important concepts. And questions that help explain. These can guide children to make sense of their observations and start co-constructing those explanations with you. So questions are very important, and open-ended questions, not just a yes or no, because you want to encourage the child to think and explain. Whoops. So I'm going to show you another video. And again, see if you can find examples of science practices in this one. And then also, how did the educator support and encourage the children's engagement in those science practices? This is an activity called creating craters. Some of you may have, this is kind of a classic activity where you have a tub of flour and different balls that you drop into the flower that make different sized craters, like craters on the moon. This one does not have subtitles, I apologize. So it's sometimes hard to understand what they're saying, even for a native English speaker, but they'll do a lot of gesturing, so I think you'll get the idea.
And I want you to pass it around so that the others can feel it too. Heavy and hard. Hard and heavy.
Hard and heavy.
Heavy and it feels. It has weight.
So they're telling the properties of the balls.
And let's hear some predictions. That means you're making a guess. What kind of crater do you think that would be? It looks like a deep crater. I think it'll maybe make a little one because it's heavy. It won't go that far. It's heavy. Okay, so no deep one. Deep, but not very wide. Yeah, not very wide. What do you think? We're going to make a prediction. Remember, we make a guess. What kind of crater will that be? Deep one. A deep one. How wide? Can you show me with your hands how wide? Really wide. 3, 2, 3. Drop. Oh, it bounced. It bounced. You take your ball out and put it back in here, and then let's take a look at that crater. Put it back in the bowl. There's 2. I was lost in a deep. So we got 2 craters. I want to show you something. Do you see? See some of these white lines that came out here? Yeah. Do you see any pictures of the moon over there where you see a crater with lines like that? There, yeah. What about down on the bottom of the moon there? And what does this crater look like? It looks like it is pretty deep. It's pretty deep, but it's not that wide. All right, you hold yours here. Okay, and you hold yours up there, and you ready? 1, 2, 3. Which one's the deeper? Mine did. And you dropped yours from where? Look where mine did. It just did a little bit.
So they were identical balls, but one was dropped from up high and one from down low.
The same size and weight. But mine went deeper because I threw it up high, and up high gives it more force.
Okay, so which science practices? Yeah. Which of those science practices did you observe in this one?
Well, the control of variables.
Yeah, right. So, and that comparing and contrasting. So that gets into constructing explanations. Yeah, and analyzing data, right? When they were comparing the 2 craters. Yes, right. So the flower, we put some like cocoa on top, and then the flower, you get the ejecta, just like you do when a crater hits the moon. And there's lines of white flour, and they compared that to the image of the real moon. This is obviously a model. So we hit most of them. Again, not tool use. We have some other activities that get into tool use. You probably saw the picture of the girl with the binoculars. And yeah, you hit on how did we support that. We did connect it to the real phenomenon. Asked a lot of questions to help them notice the important details, make those comparisons. Didn't tell them the answer, but you can ask the questions that kind of guide them to finding it out on their own. Thank you. So just to sum up about My Sky Tonight before I move on to a couple other programs, really science is about answering questions based on our evidence from our observation, and we want to focus on supporting young children in investigating phenomena. They're really capable of making sense of their worlds if you provide them with experiences for that. So I encourage you to do this for all the children in your lives, even if you're not doing it as part of your profession. Children in your family, your kids' friends, help them, whether boys or girls, really embrace science. And one more thing I wanted to add. At the end of the project, we got really interested in storybooks and stories and how they can support children in engaging in science. because of that bear shadow activity. It was so popular and so effective, we thought, what role did the story play in that? And we got a little additional funding from the NSF. And with that, we were able to create our own storybook, Breakfast Moon. I brought a copy. You're welcome to take a look. This is a story about a girl and her younger brother who they observe the moon in the sky every morning. You can see the moon over there. And they record their observations in a journal. They also decide what to have for breakfast based on the shape of the moon. So the moon is accurately portrayed in our illustrations, which is not the case in a lot of children's books. And the main character is modeling how to do science. Another thing that was really important to us, representation in media is really important. So the main character is a girl. She's also an African-American girl. We have worked with a children's book author who talks about media, books, and other media as both mirrors and windows. And so children need to see themselves represented, and that's the mirror. Windows also are important too because they're getting to see how other people live. Minorities in the United States are underrepresented in the media, so we're trying to do our little part to help with that. And we also had a girl as the main character. Her name is May, named after Mae Jemison, the astronaut, who's also African-American. So we're hoping to get more funding from the NSF to further explore how stories can support children in engaging in science. And we hope that this book is a start to that, and we want to make more. So. Okay, so I wanted to share a story of this woman, Jennifer Jackson Godfrey. She works in the Oregon State Park. So Oregon is the state on the West Coast north of California. And Jennifer grew up in Oregon in a working class family. They worked for the lumber industry, so cutting down trees. In 1987, she was a girl. I don't know, she was probably around 10. And Halley's Comet was coming through. And her father, who worked in the lumber industry, liked to watch the program Nova on PBS. It was a science program. And so this comet was coming, and he decided to buy a telescope, which was a really big deal for her family because they were expensive, and her family was a working class family. And they were all getting really excited for this comet. And on the night when it was time to observe the comet, her dad got the telescope all set up and got everyone to come around and take a look. And when it was her turn, she was really excited, but she was a little too short for to reach the eyepiece, so she instinctively reached up for it and pulled it down to her eye, which of course then got the comet out of view. And her dad got upset and said, no, go away. And she felt really hurt, and he fixed it. And then she looked, but she couldn't actually see it. But she pretended she could, and then she went away because she felt like she did something wrong. So that was one of her early experiences with science and astronomy. Later, she went to college and thought, you know what, I'm going to try to take an astronomy course because my dad's kind of into it. Maybe I can connect with him if I take astronomy. But she felt really discouraged because it was nothing like Nova. There was a lot of math. And the professor just wasn't very encouraging to her, so she gave up again on astronomy. Later in life, she became a ranger for the Oregon State Parks. And again, it was kind of an attempt to connect with her father, who worked in the lumber industry, and she was learning about trees in the parks, so she was, how can I talk to my dad? At that point, she was looking at how to kind of carve out her niche in her career, and she found a training that we were offering, the ASP, and this is not to toot our own horn, but another program I worked on was called Sky Rangers, where we provided training for interpretive rangers in parks on how to talk about the night sky with their visitors. She took that course and really thrived in it because we were gearing it specifically for people working in parks. She later participated in My Sky Tonight, the program for working with young children, and she has become kind of the go-to astronomy expert in the Oregon State Parks. She coordinated their entire outreach effort for the 2017 total solar eclipse. The path of totality went through Oregon, so people were flocking to Oregon to see this total eclipse. I went to Oregon too. It was amazing, my first total solar eclipse. And she's now the astronomy expert for the whole state of Oregon and their parks. So I just wanted to share this example. She had some negative experiences when she was young that turned her off for a long time. She has since talked to her father about how that Halley's Comet viewing really upset her. And he said, you know what? He was feeling insecure because he didn't really know how to use the telescope. He had been hoping to connect with her with the telescope, but his own insecurity scared her away. So again, it can be, people can have the best intentions, but they send the wrong messages, and it can have a big impact. But clearly she was meant to get into astronomy, and I'm so glad she finally found her way there. So how do we prevent those negative experiences? This is not an ASP program, but I really admire the Sci Girls. Again, it's a television program on PBS, the Public Broadcasting System. And they have a lot of great resources for educators, and all of their recommendations and best practices are based in a lot of research. So you can go to their site and see all their citations of where they get these ideas from. And these are their main recommendations. I brought along, and these are all available in Spanish on their website as well. So I encourage you to go there. They have this guide. This one is in English because that's the one I had, where they go a little more into detail on each of these recommended steps for how to encourage girls. So if you want to take a look at this after as well, and again, you could get it in Spanish on their website, Sci Girls Connect. That's their educator resource page. I believe all of the episodes are available as videos online, and they're all available in Spanish as well. And they're showing girls doing science in the program. Collaboration is very important to girls. They want to work together and have clear, fair communication. And I would argue that's important for everyone and important to the field of science. They want personally relevant activities that are making a difference in the world and matter in their lives. Hands-on activities that are really open-ended, not where they already have the goal set out for them before they even start. Accommodate different learning styles, whether it's working solo, kind of quiet, are they more of a writer, they like to move more, so learning more about different styles of learning. Specific positive feedback, this is really important. There's a lot of discussion about this concept of a growth mindset. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that's the idea of, instead of telling a girl, oh, you're so smart, or good job, giving them feedback on something very specific they did, and also embracing the challenge and the failures as well, that's part of the process, and not so they don't get discouraged when something doesn't go as they planned. And praising the effort rather than just saying, if you tell a girl you're so smart and they hear that over and over, that isn't based on any effort or anything they did, and then if they're unable to do something, then they're doubting their own identity. Critical thinking is really important, and role models and mentors, and I know you all are here because you're excellent role models and mentors. So I encourage you to check out their site, and it goes into a lot more detail on each of these. Again, this is not an ASP program, but we really admire their work, and we've one of my coworkers attended one of their trainings and based some of the work I'm about to tell you about on this. I will say that the Girl Scouts also has a great guide on strategies specifically for working in girls in STEM that you could check out as well. So the ASP has partnered with the Girl Scouts of the USA. They recently, so Girl Scouts is kind of a club for girls. Do you all know the Girl Scouts, or
yes?
Not so much. It's girls start from. You have something similar? Yeah.
No, no.
Girls,
I know.
yeah.
I don't know how to go in, but...
Yeah, okay. So many girls in the United States participate. You can start from very young and go up through high school. And it's kind of a club for girls led by usually one of the moms of one of the girls. They're really inclusive and encourage independent thinking and do different activities to help build different skills and experiences. And when a girl completes an experience that's been laid out, she gets a badge, and she'll have like a sash that she wears, and she wears the different badges. So the Girl Scouts recently released a series of STEM badges, so they're really focusing on STEM. And that included a few space science badges, and we helped them come up with the criteria for those. And those are shown in the top there. Those are the space science badges. And in addition to helping with the STEM programming, we are doing some training for amateur astronomers. So amateur astronomers in the United States, those are hobby astronomers who do this in their free time, are 73% male. So overwhelming. It's kind of an old white guy hobby. You know, it takes money to buy a telescope. So, and amateur astronomers recognize that they want to change this. They want a more diverse group of people coming and discovering a love of astronomy. And so we are offering trainings on how to make their events more welcoming to girls. So our main program for amateur astronomers is called the Night Sky Network, and we're connecting them with the Girl Scouts and running these trainings on best practices for working with girls. The trainings, first of all, talk about understanding the challenge. Like I talked about earlier, right? Like, we're all part of this system. It's not about blaming you bad old white men, you know. Sometimes they have the best intentions, like the volunteers in the video I showed you at the beginning, right? But they aren't even aware of their own biases. Thinking about the kind of like micro messages that they may be sending out without realizing it, and adjusting their language to be more welcoming. And then at the end of the workshop, they're encouraged to just take one thing they learned and change one thing. And that's a good start. These workshops are delivered by my coworker, Teresa Sommer. I just want to mention her name. And these are some quotes from some of the astronomers who went through the training. I'm going to practice asking more questions as opposed to just telling girls facts. Redirect the focus on the questioner instead of the answerer, so not just rattling off a bunch of information to show off how much I know. And amateur astronomers tend to do that because they're really excited about it, and they want to share it. And encouraging experiences and being supportive when there's failures. So if a girl grabs a telescope and knocks it out of whack, don't say, oh no, what'd you do? Get out of here, like Jennifer's father did. But explain, oh, well, we're actually pointing the telescope at that specific object, and try putting your hands behind your back and walking up and leaning down like this, and showing what the right way to do it without discouraging them. So this is a newer program, and we're still working on this and getting more measuring results of how this is working, but we're really excited and hope our longer term goal is to really diversify amateur astronomy in the United States as well. So just to sum up my main points here, I said this at the beginning too, is we really need to increase positive STEM experiences for girls and work on counteracting those negative messages, recognizing that they're there, you know, they're getting these negative messages, we're working on making it better, but recognize that girls coming to a program have already had all this stuff put into their heads already. The strategies that I shared with you for working with young children from My Sky Tonight, the Sci Girl strategies, are effective for everyone, not just girls. These are good things to do for boys and adults, and you know, while they will be beneficial to help girls, they're going to help everyone. So you don't have to do anything special for girls. And increasing the number of girls interested in STEM and women pursuing STEM careers, it's good for the girls and women, that they have more opportunities. But it's good for the field as well because we'll have more diverse ideas. We're missing out on so much experience and innovation because of the girls and women who are not in those fields. So do it for science as well as for the girls and women. Here are the resources I mentioned if you want to. My Sky Tonight, that's our program, and the National Association for the Education of Young Children has great resources. All those other ones I explained to you, and the one on the bottom is this book, which you're welcome to take a look at. This is from the National Science Teachers Association in the United States, and it's a framework for action for girls in science. So it's more extensive, it goes into a lot of the research and steps you can take. So if you want to take a look, I've got this up here. And that's it. Thank you.
Could you pass the first video?
The video?
Yes, again.
You want to play it again?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So this video, I'll just zip through my slides backwards. This is a video from the BBC, the British Broadcasting Channel. And I think that one's it. And it's not really scientifically based, but it's a nice illustration of some of the points I covered in my talk. Oops. So they dressed a girl, a young girl as a boy, and a young boy as a girl, and had some volunteers play with them with different toys. So you'll see what happens. And this is on YouTube, so if you want to.
Look at this. Look at this. Look at that. Oh, you Sophie. Look, what does this say? Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams. Ooh, look at this, Sophie. Can you help me out?
Che sono violenti.
I think she might have you've done the best.
I would tell you actually that Sophie is Edward.
Ah,
I don't change anything.
I know you thought, oh, this is a little girl, so I have to give her a little girl thing.
Hello. Hello.
Este es otro, ¿no?
What's this one? What's that one do? Is that a robot? What about this? You like that one? What does this one do? Oliver.
You've gone for, you could say, boy toys.
Possibly in my subconscious, but for me, I was just going for what was around me, but in fact my subconscious was automatically playing a trick on me that I
If I tell you that he's actually a girl.
Really?
Yes.
That's really interesting. I suppose it's because of the stereotype.
And then that changed your behaviour towards the child.
It did.
And your behaviour was quite directive.
1, 2, 3.
Beep, 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 beep. Do you see my robot?
Robot, car, puzzle game. I think she's going to be much more physical in handling the child than the other ones have been with girls.
That really astounded me because I thought that I was somebody that had a really open mind.
Surprise. So I automatically went for the pink fluffy toys as soon as a girl, so I was stereotyping.
I've always thought I was rather more open-minded than that, and I would think, you know, these are children's toys, whatever the gender.
It will make me think the next time I'm with a child, certainly my niece and my nephew, to make sure that I am actually being sort of fair and equal with all of them, and just giving each child an opportunity to just be whoever they are.
Yeah, so, and I I did say it in the beginning when I showed that, but I think it's important to notice that those volunteers had the best intentions and don't think of themselves as stereotype, but we're all part of this system, right? And so we all make these mistakes without even realizing it because it's ingrained in all of us. Thanks.
Questions? How did you decide, Hannah? Well, first, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's very beautiful work, and I think it's going to be very helpful for the purpose of this meeting. And the question is, how did you decide what age, how to start? From 3 years, 2 years, 4 years?
Yes.
How was the
criteria? We had been running trainings for educators in museums and parks for many years. And the participants of those trainings loved the materials we were giving them. They were really enthusiastic, but they said, you know, parents come with their really young children and we don't know what to do with them. And the activities that ASP was providing them were good for like maybe 8 and up, 6 and up, but not for the really young ones. And it would be like, here, do this coloring activity, you know? So we were hearing again and again from our audiences that they wanted to know how to work with young children. So we thought, okay, this is what we've got to do. And honestly, it was very intimidating for us because we didn't have experience working with young children. But we partnered with those researchers who you saw in the video, who specialize in early childhood psychology and how children learn about science. And so we got together with them and said, this is the problem we want to address. What should we do? And we actually initially chose 3 to 8, but then we realized that's way too broad. We can't create something for a 3-year-old that's going to work for an 8-year-old, because especially for very young children, they're developing so quickly that something that works for even a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old is a big difference. So that was already a pretty broad gap. So we decided we wanted to go for ages before they start school, pre-K, pre-kindergarten. And honestly, I have to say, I think 3 is a little bit of a stretch. I think most of our materials are better for 4 and 5. And for 3-year-olds, definitely some adjustment needs to be made. And
how many kids have you trained in this way?
And for
how long, you know?
Right.
This type of skills.
So so the children you saw in those videos, we were testing out the materials we were developing. So those were all in museums near San Francisco over the course of a few years. And we don't have exact numbers, but we probably reached a few hundred children in the San Francisco area. But then after that development, we had created these materials and we sent them out to museums all over the United States. And educators at the museums participated in an online training on how do you, like some of the science practices stuff I covered with you, except it was extended, it was a 6-week workshop. So they were distributed to 200 museums across the US, and then they in turn worked with families in their local communities. So I don't have a number as exactly how many families those 200 museums reached, but it would be thousands. Yeah, so that's what the ASP does a lot because we're very small. We reach the kind of middleman who then reaches the broader public rather than us working directly with the public. That's how we can have a broader reach with a pretty small staff.
And do you have any communication with Europe? Do you know what they are doing in that sense?
Not a lot. So this work has been presented a couple of times at the International Planetarium Society meeting, and they were really excited about it. But so far we haven't taken any steps to really distribute it in Europe. It's just a matter of funding and, you know, time. But the ASP mostly operates within the United States, but we're really interested in having a more international reach. So if any of you want to chat about partnering in any of those realms, we'd love to. Yeah.
Bueno,
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. This was a great pleasure.
Maybe one last question.
Sure.
No? So, have you made some follow-up of these kids? I mean, what happened?
No,
They have how is their performance? No?
Right.
Do you expect that the
Yeah.
performance will be
With
better?
this work, no, but I told you we just submitted a grant proposal last night. And that's going to be about these storybooks. And we're going to do a much longer longitudinal study looking at the kids and how they're affected over time. We can't do it over the course of, a decade, because, but maybe over a year, So hopefully the NSF gives us the money to do that. Yeah.
Hopefully,
Can we see this?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. This is
And this one we have plans to eventually translate.
yeah, we are going to buy it.
Great. Well, here, this is our. It's not in Spanish yet, so you might